Welcome back to the deep dive. Today, we are strapping in for an exploration into a topic that touches literally every part of our lives, really, negotiation.
It really does.
But we're not going to treat it like some, dry management checklist. We're approaching it as an art form focused pretty ruthlessly on winning.
That's exactly the right frame. And when you hear a phrase like the art of winning, your mind might jump straight to, I don't know, high-pressure tactics or brute force.
Sure, the old hardball stuff.
Exactly. But the material we've gathered today, which is pulled from Philip Robbins' guide, Negotiating, the art of winning, it reveals something far more sophisticated and I think critically much more strategic.
So it's a system.
It's absolutely a system. It's one designed not just to achieve success, but to control success.
Okay, let's unpack that system now.
Yeah.
We've got the strategic blueprint here, the core structural components that Robbins lays out. And what's surprising to me right off the bat is its profound focus on control. This isn't just about preparing your numbers or your bottom line. It's about preparing your personality and, crucially, preparing for failure. Most guides sort of stop at the handshake.
They do.
But Robbins, it seems like he starts planning for the walk away and maybe even the walk back.
Exactly. Our mission today, for you, the learner, is to map this whole high-level framework. We want to give you the quickest, most organized path to understanding the full scope of what, according to Robbins, really defines success and failure in these scenarios. It's a masterpiece of systematic thinking.
So if we look at the entire landscape that he lays out, what specific elements did he think were absolutely necessary for mastering this art of winning? Because it feels surprisingly holistic.
Well, the essential insight, I think, is that the whole process has to be treated as a system. A holistic system where, and this is the key, you have to anticipate failure before success is even achieved.
That feels counterintuitive.
It does, but it's vital. The structure we'll examine today breaks down into 3 distinct and necessary components. You've got the foundational pillars that have to be in place.
Okay.
The critical safety nets that let you manage failure when it happens.
Right.
And then the really detailed preparation checklist for execution. But the emphasis across all 3 is on control. Controlling the dialogue, controlling your own personal capacity, and controlling the outcome, whether you strike a deal or you have to leave the room.
I love that. I love that perspective. It immediately shifts the goal from just get the best price to achieve the best controlled outcome.
That's it.
It's about minimizing risk right alongside maximizing the gain.
Yeah.
So let's jump right into section 1, which Robbins calls the foundational pillars of negotiation success. These look like the non-negotiable conditions for victory.
They really are. These 3 pillars, we're talking superior methods, personal capabilities, and causality analysis. They all have to be in place at the same time.
So it's not a menu you can pick from.
Not at all. If any one of these foundational elements is weak, the whole superstructure you've built for winning, it just collapses under pressure.
Okay, so let's start with that first pillar, the focus on methodology. Better negotiation styles and methods. Just the inclusion of that word better, it immediately suggests there's a standard, right? That just having a method isn't good enough.
It's not. It speaks profoundly to the need for continuous refinement. I mean, think about it. If Robbins had just called this chapter Styles and Methods, it would imply they're all equal.
Right. Any style works if you're good at it.
But by demanding better methods, the framework forces you to critically analyze what's happening now. The current trends, the best practices. It forces you to move beyond the standard default approaches that are, predictable or easily countered.
So if I walk into a really high-stakes deal using the exact same playbook I used on my last 10 deals, I'm potentially violating this first pillar.
You are.
Because my static method might have been surpassed by dynamic opponents who are, integrating new data or behavioral science.
Precisely. This is the difference between just performing a task and truly mastering a discipline. And you asked what makes a method better. We can infer a few things.
Okay. First, efficiency. Getting to your desired outcome faster with fewer concessions. Second, relationship preservation.
That's a big one.
It is. Because winning today shouldn't mean you lose all future opportunities tomorrow. And third, and this is crucial, integrating modern insights.
Tell me more about those modern insights. What does a superior method look like today versus, say, 20 years ago?
Well, in the past, a superior method often centered on, positional strength, who has more power, or even tactical deception.
Right. Playing your cards close to your chest.
Exactly. Today, the superior methods incorporate principles from behavioral economics, from psychology. For instance, just understanding a concept like loss aversion.
The idea that people fight harder to avoid a loss than to get an equivalent gain.
That's the one. A superior negotiator can use that to frame their demands not as a future cost to the other side, but as a way of preventing a guaranteed loss if the deal falls through. It changes everything. That's a fascinating detail. The implicit requirement to constantly be assessing and upgrading your techniques. It means the study of negotiation never really ends.
It's a living discipline. It demands continuous external input. The moment you get complacent with your standard operating procedure, you lose your advantage.
So a better method might be a hybrid of different approaches.
Absolutely. It might involve incorporating something like the getting to yes style, that integrative bargaining focused on mutual interests. But you deploy it with the tactical rigor of game theory. You seek collaboration, but you never ever mistake collaboration for weakness. A static approach is just inherently a recipe for failure when you're facing dynamic opponents.
Okay, that covers the procedural and methodological side, but Robbins immediately shifts the focus inward with the second pillar, personal capabilities and persuasion. This really highlights the vital role of the individual.
It does.
Success is definitely not purely procedural. The human element matters profoundly.
This is where we bridge that gap between having the perfect blueprint and, actually constructing the building. You can have the best data, the most refined strategy on paper, but if the human delivering it lacks the personal capacities for influence,
It all falls flat.
it stalls or it fails spectacularly. It's that synthesis of capabilities and persuasion that is so critical.
So let's explore that internal toolkit. Beyond just, being charismatic, what specific personal qualities is he implying here by capabilities in persuasion?
Well, it starts with emotional intelligence, the ability not only to read the room, but to manage your own internal state. Can you maintain self-control when the other side launches a tactical attack or drops a really low anchor to throw you off? That composure, that alone establishes incredible credibility.
And beyond composure.
Beyond that, you need communication clarity, you need active listening, and crucially, pattern recognition. A skilled negotiator sees those tiny shifts in body language. They identify the other side's organizational hierarchy, and they recognize common tactical plays like the good cop, bad cop routine instantly.
So preparation's only half the battle. The ability to articulate your position persuasively, to connect with the counterparty on a human level, and to actually sway their perspective. That's all dependent on the individual's strengths.
It is, and this directly answers that critical why question. Why do some really well-prepared negotiators still fail?
Because their personal capacities were lacking.
Exactly. They may have all the facts, but they lack the finesse. And what's more, the focus on persuasion, the actual word, suggests the goal is genuine buy-in, not just coercion.
That's a key distinction.
It is. If I use my capabilities to truly convince you that this deal benefits your organization's long-term interests, you become committed to the outcome. But if I just coerce you through positional leverage, you're just waiting for the first opportunity to undermine the agreement or, get your revenge in the future.
That's the difference between a one-off transaction and building a sustainable partnership. It requires empathy, active listening, and framing your proposal not just for your own benefit, but showing its genuine benefit to them.
Yes.
Now, here's a dilemma I want to pose just to sort of critique this a bit. If I am naturally high in personal capacity, I'm a great communicator, I'm very charismatic, but I hate planning. I skip the checklist. Does Robbins imply that my skill can compensate for poor preparation? Or is preparation totally non-negotiable?
That is the ultimate tension, isn't it? And based on the structure of the book, I would say preparation is absolutely non-negotiable. Personal capacity is the accelerant, preparation is the fuel.
I like that analogy.
A highly charismatic negotiator with poor data will eventually hit an informational roadblock, and their charisma will be exposed as just empty rhetoric. But conversely, a meticulous planner with zero personal capability will deliver a perfect argument that just lands with a dull thud.
Because they failed to build rapport or read the room.
Precisely. The structure mandates that both must exist as foundational pillars for success. One cannot compensate for the absence of the other.
Fascinating. Okay, moving on to the third foundational pillar. Robbins demands a thorough analysis of causal factors, reasons for the success and failure of negotiation. This sounds a bit academic causality analysis. What does it mean practically for the person at the table?
This is really the highest level of preparedness. It forces the negotiator to adopt a kind of post-mortem mindset before the negotiation even begins.
So you're learning from mistakes before you even make them.
You are. You're proactively learning from historical mistakes, both your own and others, and integrating that knowledge into your strategy. If we ground the term causality analysis in plain English, it means anticipating the specific tripwires that will cause this particular dialogue to fail.
It's like running a high-fidelity simulation in your head. You figure out the most likely points of failure, and then you design your strategy specifically to neutralize those vulnerabilities.
Exactly that. We can infer the implied variables that predict outcomes. Success likely hinges on deep intelligence gathering. Did we know their real constraints? Clarity of objectives. Did we know our precise walkaway point and theirs? But let's focus on the failure side for a second, because that's where the real aha moments are for the learner.
Okay, give me a concrete scenario, a predictable failure that this pillar is designed to prevent.
All right, think about a failure that stems from misaligned internal objectives. Say you successfully negotiate a massive, complex project deal with the lead business development manager. You shake hands, it feels great. 3 days later, the deal collapses. Because you failed to identify that the manager lacked sign-off authority from the COO, who had completely different strategic priorities. Your failure wasn't in your bargaining, it was a failure in causal analysis. You didn't correctly map the decision-making structure.
So rigidity, poor information, emotional outbursts, or misjudging the other side's motivations. These aren't just random mistakes.
Not at all.
They are predictable, recurring patterns of failure that you should have identified and neutralized during prep.
Correct. Another common failure pattern is the focus trap. Negotiators often get obsessed with the single, quantifiable issue price, when the real value and the ultimate reason for failure lies in the non-quantifiable stuff.
Like payment terms or IP rights or future collaboration.
Exactly. If you haven't categorized price focus as a potential failure pattern and widened your scope, you lose. By cataloging these reasons for failure, Robbins arms the negotiator with a defensive shield. You move from just reacting to actively managing the dynamics because you've already predicted the most likely pitfalls.
So these three pillars, superior technique, personal influence, and this causal analysis, together they form the necessary mindset. And if you don't master the mindset first, the tactical checklist that follows is just wasted effort.
And that leads us perfectly into what I find the most strategic and frankly the most interesting part of this framework. Section 2. If Section 1 is the mindset, Section 2 is the ultimate expression of control. This is where Robbins defines the true art of winning, not just by striking a deal, but by ensuring that you control the outcome even when the primary goal is missed. This is the critical safety net planning for dialogue failure.
Most people think negotiation ends when you either sign the paper or walk out the door. It seems Robbins is telling us that the real strategic work actually begins when the conversation stalls.
That's it. This section really reveals the depth of his strategic thinking. A lot of negotiation guides, they stop once the deal is done or once the walkaway point is reached. Robbins understands that in complex, high-value negotiations, failure to reach an agreement might just be a temporary setback.
Or, if it's permanent, it needs to be executed perfectly.
Executed perfectly to preserve future options. Absolutely.
So let's start with the first part of this safety net, the alternative plan for returning to dialogue. A plan focused specifically on re-engaging after an impasse, not just walking away.
This is the strategic countermeasure to definitive failure. It requires the negotiator to accept that failure in a single session is common and, maybe even necessary to create the right amount of pressure. A plan for returning acknowledges that deadlocks often happen because of emotional fatigue or temporary misunderstandings.
Or just reaching a boundary that the other side isn't ready to cross yet.
Right now. Exactly.
So what does a concrete plan for returning look like in practice? It sounds like you need to have reserved concessions or maybe alternative framing arguments ready to go, specifically to break a deadlock.
That's a great way to put it. It's a mechanism to make the interaction dynamic again. Let's use a hypothetical merger negotiation. The talks break down over valuation. There's a $50 million gap. Neither side will budge. Your initial strategy is exhausted.
Okay, we're stuck.
You're stuck. Your alternative plan for return might not involve an immediate financial concession. Instead, you deploy a strategic dialogue ignition switch. You pause the talks and you say something like, "We clearly need new information to bridge this gap. What if we table the valuation for 2 weeks and instead we spend that time collaboratively auditing the expected synergies in the logistics chain?"
I see.
If the expected savings are higher than we previously modeled, that could absorb the $50 million gap without touching the cash price.
That's brilliant. You're using the alternative plan to change the scope of the discussion. You're introducing reserved concessions like time and collaborative auditing to unlock the impasse on the main issue.
Precisely. You control the narrative of the impasse. This allows you to be the one who suggests the graceful path back to productive talks, and you maintain strategic control. You're demonstrating commitment not just to the deal, but to solving the problem with them.
Which is very different from just having an exit plan.
Completely different. The goal here is resuscitation because the relationship and the ultimate goal are still worth pursuing.
So the core implication is that a true winning strategy recognizes that achieving the primary goal in one session is actually pretty rare.
It is.
And controlling the continuation of the conversation is often the real victory. It reduces the psychological cost of failing in that first session.
It's risk mitigation wrapped in strategic patience. It lets you introduce time, the great neutralizer, back into the equation. It allows tempers to cool and maybe, just maybe, organizational priorities to shift slightly on their side.
Okay, now let's pivot to the second, more definitive safety net. Fallback lines when negotiations fail. This is establishing clear boundaries when the outcome is truly unattainable. This sounds a lot like BAT&A.
It does. Best alternative to a negotiated agreement.
Right. So how does Robbins' fallback line differ from the standard BAT&A concept?
This is a really critical distinction, and it often gets muddled. A BT&A is the outcome. It's your best available option outside of the current negotiation. So if you're buying a car, your BT&A might be buying the same model from a different dealership for $45,000.
Yep.
Robbins' fallback line is the pre-commitment boundary. It's the psychological and strategic point of no return. It's a boundary beyond which continuing the negotiation is detrimental, because the deal on the table is now demonstrably worse than your BAT&A.
So the fallback line is the trigger point. It's the line you commit to in advance that tells you when to walk away and execute your BAT&A. It's a mechanism to protect you from yourself.
Exactly. And why is that pre-commitment so crucial here? Because of human psychology, because of the sunk cost fallacy.
Yes.
Once you are deep in a dialogue, you've invested time, emotional energy, resources. The pressure to concede just one more thing, to close the deal and salvage that investment is immense.
I've been there.
We all have. These fallback lines must be established before that emotional pressure sets in. They are the rational commitment device that preserves you from your own emotional weakness, ensuring you don't suffer from settlement fever and accept a fundamentally bad deal just to get a handshake.
I see the difference so clearly now. The BAT&A is the objective best alternative out there. The fallback line is the subjective, predetermined red line you draw in the sand to protect your interests against your own cognitive biases.
Yes. If the other party cannot or will not meet the bare minimum defined by your fallback line, then the optimal decision is walking away to execute the BAT&A. You minimize damage and you preserve your credibility.
Okay, let's just review that contrast one more time for the listener because it's so important. The alternative plan for returning to dialogue aims to save the current dialogue.
Right, because a better agreement is still possible. It's a tactical maneuver for resuscitation.
Whereas the fallback line is the predefined strategic exit point. It's established before the pressure starts, and it dictates when you must leave the table, because any further discussion is less beneficial than your best alternative outside the deal.
They are the ultimate expression of control. One saves the conversation, the other saves your bottom line. And if you haven't prepared both of these, you haven't truly prepared for a high-stakes environment. You're either leaving money on the table or you're risking organizational damage by signing a bad deal.
That brings us from the strategic architecture of winning into the physical process of preparation. Now that we've covered the foundational pillars and the critical safety nets, we can move into the granular, tactical application. Section 3 is the physical checklist.
It's the implementation phase. This is where you take concepts like better methods and causal analysis and you break them down into actionable steps. These steps reveal a really high degree of intentionality and sequencing.
So preparation is an active creation of the future dialogue.
That's a perfect way to put it.
Okay, let's start with a crucial early planning step. Step 2. Determine the approach style you will follow. This forces you to explicitly choose your behavioral and strategic posture. Collaborative, competitive, accommodative.
It demands conscious intentionality. You cannot just rely on your default personality. You have to fit the style to the objective, to the opponent, and to the desired future relationship dynamic.
So, for example, if you're negotiating the terms of a one-time distressed asset sale, where the relationship ends immediately after the deal.
Then a purely competitive, hard bargaining style might be warranted. You're there to maximize short-term cash flow.
But if you're negotiating a joint venture where success relies on 5 years of deep mutual trust and information sharing, that same competitive style would just destroy the deal before the ink is even dry.
Precisely. And this connects directly back to our first foundational pillar, the necessity of better methods. The negotiation style has to be a conscious choice. A tactical choice of style is crucial for controlling the tone and flow of the whole interaction.
What happens if you assess the situation incorrectly? You realize halfway through that your chosen style, say collaborative, is being ruthlessly exploited by the other side.
That's where the flexibility implicit in better methods comes in. A prepared negotiator has to have a plan for an intentional style pivot.
That sounds tricky.
It's delicate. You can't just go from let's be friends to my way or the highway without destroying all rapport. A strategic pivot might involve saying something like, I appreciate the spirit of collaboration, but based on the data you've just provided, it seems we need to shift our focus to protecting our core requirements first before we discuss joint gains.
So you pivot the style using facts and a neutral, firm tone.
Exactly. You use the tools from the other steps to support your pivot.
Okay, moving on to step 4, we see a crucial focus on validation. Step 4, determine the method of proof evidence. This is pre-mapping exactly how your claims will be substantiated during the conversation.
This step elevates your preparation from, qualitative goal setting to rigorous quantitative justification. The centrality of facts and data is just non-negotiable in serious negotiations. Proof implies rigorous support for every position you take.
So it means knowing not just what you need, but the concrete evidence that justifies it to a skeptical counterparty.
To them, and even more importantly, to an outside observer.
So if I'm asking for a huge investment to restructure a supply chain, I can't just show up with a PowerPoint deck. I need to determine the method of proof. Am I using independent third-party audit data? Am I citing peer-reviewed industry reports?
Exactly. And choosing the appropriate method of proof is entirely tactical. Think of the different languages of proof. You've got financial, legal, testimonial, emotional. If you're negotiating with the general counsel, legal precedent and contractual language are your methods.
But if you're talking to the chief marketing officer,
Your method might be testimonial evidence from successful clients, supported by market segmentation analysis showing the ROI potential.
it's proof tailored to the psychology and the role of the person you're talking to. And if you fail to pre-map this, you're just fumbling, you lose confidence, and you give them an easy opening to undermine your whole position by just questioning your sources.
This is a critical step in turning your assertions into undeniable facts. If you state, our service is 15% more efficient, your method of proof should be a blinded comparative study or an integrated dashboard showing real-time metrics. If you can't back it up instantly with a rigorous method, it's just an assertion.
Right.
And they can just discard it.
Right. Next, we hit step 5, which deals entirely with framing and communication. Step 5, determine the appropriate entry point approach and its language. This is about choosing that initial hook, the tone, the linguistic choices that set the foundation for the entire dialogue.
This is where the art truly shines. It's all about managing perceptions from the very first minute. The entry point isn't just small talk. It's about establishing momentum and rapport. Robbins emphasizes that how you start defines where you end up.
If you start defensively, you'll probably spend the whole negotiation just justifying yourself.
You will. But if you start collaboratively, you invite cooperation, and you set a higher initial frame for the whole conversation.
So if the negotiation is about resolving a contract dispute that caused financial losses on both sides, the entry point shouldn't start with blame.
Absolutely not. It should probably start with the mutual desire for a financially stable working relationship going forward, or a focus on shared risk mitigation. You're using the entry point to anchor the discussion not in the conflict, but in the shared goal.
And the emphasis on language is crucial here.
It is. Word choice, formality, rhetorical style, these are all strategic variables. Think about anchoring effects. If you open with an extreme proposal, you anchor the discussion high. But that language has to be tempered by your chosen style.
What about the risk of what you might call strategic dissonance, where my words are signaling collaboration, but my tone is signaling aggression?
Strategic dissonance is the enemy of persuasion, and the coordination between step 2, your style, and step 5, your language, is designed to prevent it. If you choose a collaborative style, your language has to avoid adversarial terms like demand, ultimatum, or reject.
Instead, you'd use framing like, explore, mutual priority, or seek clarification.
That's it. The entry point must be perfectly tailored to the other party's sensitivities and expectations. You have to avoid language that triggers immediate defensiveness. You are selling the conversation itself before you even start selling the deal.
So preparation involves not just what you say, but practicing how you say that first foundational statement. The entry point is your chance to establish credibility and momentum before the other side has a chance to anchor the dialogue negatively.
It's holistic integration. The entry point has to align the style from step 2 with the proof from step 4 through the intentional language of step 5. It ensures consistency and it maximizes the psychological impact.
Finally, we have the general planning step that ties it all together. Determine the steps and arrangement sequence. This is process mapping, structuring the whole negotiation chronologically.
This step ensures that your points are delivered in a logical, impactful order. It's your detailed agenda, and its primary purpose is to prevent rambling, make sure all critical points get covered, and strategically sequence your concessions or difficult demands. This is the moment you transform all your facts into a narrative arc.
Why is that arrangement so valuable? Couldn't I just address items as they come up naturally in the conversation?
You could, but then you surrender control of the momentum and you risk a premature impasse. A well-structured sequence ensures that sensitive topics are addressed at the right time.
Ideally, after you've built some rapport or reached consensus on smaller, easier points.
Exactly. It's the concept of building psychological capital. You get the counterparty to say yes 3 times on minor issues, the agenda, the payment vehicle, the delivery timeline, before you introduce the major hurdle like price or exclusivity.
So the sequence is designed to establish a pattern of agreement. You're setting a psychological precedent that we are people who agree with each other.
Precisely. If you fail to arrange the sequence strategically, you risk leading with a non-negotiable, difficult demand. If that first demand is rejected, the dynamic is immediately set to adversarial, a pattern of rejection, and that makes every subsequent point harder to negotiate.
So a successful sequence might look like what?
Well, it might involve 1. Establishing rapport with your entry point, 2. Agreeing on shared objectives, 3. Presenting neutral or collaborative data, your proof, 4. Addressing the core demands where you have the most leverage, and 5. Reserving the most difficult demands, or, crucially, your concessions, until the momentum of agreement is already driving the conversation toward a resolution.
That is systematic preparation. The arrangement ensures that everything, the style, the proof, the entry point, is combined into a cohesive tactical roadmap. It minimizes friction and maximizes psychological leverage.
It's the final layer of control over the interaction process itself. You are building a high-probability path to success by managing every variable you can control, from your evidence to your tone to the precise moment you introduce a critical item. Robin's checklist isn't just about having the information, it's about strategically deploying it.
It's clear after dissecting all 3 sections that Robin's art of winning is about building a comprehensive system. The true victory lies in maintaining control and optionality, regardless of the immediate outcome.
Absolutely. And to quickly summarize the comprehensive framework we've explored today, we identified those 3 foundational pillars for success.
Right. The need for superior, adaptable negotiation styles.
Harnessing and perfecting your personal capabilities in persuasion.
And conducting that thorough causality analysis of all possible success and failure factors before you even enter the room.
Then we explored the radical necessity of strategic fallbacks. Winning means having a sophisticated plan for failure.
First, the alternative plan for returning to dialogue, which aims to resuscitate the conversation after an impasse by changing the scope or parameters.
And then the fallback line, which is that pre-committed, rational boundary that dictates when you must exit to pursue your BAT&A, protecting your long-term interests against emotional pressure.
And finally, we detailed the procedural checklist for execution, making sure the whole framework is actionable.
Right. Intentionally determining the right style, rigorizing your presentation by determining the exact method of proof needed, strategically crafting the entry point and language to set the tone, and ensuring maximum impact through carefully determining the steps and the sequence.
For you, the learner, this framework provides a comprehensive map. It ensures your preparation process is systematic, thorough, and it minimizes the chance of being blindsided, whether by an opponent's aggression or your own internal emotional exhaustion.
It's the difference between hoping for a good deal and structuring a controlled outcome.
And that leads us to our final provocative thought based on the source material. Robbins frames negotiation as The art of winning, which he defines by successfully navigating complexity while always maintaining your options.
So if true victory is about control and optionality, then which single factor, the inherent personal capability to persuade, that intangible skill set of charisma, empathy, and control, or the meticulously planned fallback line, that rigid, pre-committed boundary that preserves your economic self-interest, which one ultimately dictates success when the negotiation is under maximum pressure?
That is the ultimate question of whether success is founded on character or on calculation. We will leave you with that thought as you go forward, armed with the structure of the art of winning. Thank you for joining us for the deep dive.
Until next time.